Bot? Running bot. There it goes. Hello, everybody. Chat.
Hello.
How y'all doing?
Good evening.
Happy 2 weeks before Halloween.
You're
Happy all your Halloween
Happy
shopping.
Canadian Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Canadian Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah, that's Canadian Thanksgiving, isn't it?
Happy Canurky Day.
Canurky.
Are you enjoying your maple turkey?
You enjoying your maple turkey on this day of Canurky? Are you a regular or lurky?
Today's the day that Canadians all give thanks for maple syrup and beavers.
I mean,
I
I'm
mean,
thankful
yeah,
for
so
beavers
people
every
can
day.
just-
I mean, all the white ones at least.
Monster West is good.
Yeah, I like him.
He's got like a 12-pack.
He a cutie. I want a boopy snoot.
He's a demon. He can have however many packs he wants.
Well, actually, it might be 3 weeks where you are, but we're in a different time zone, so it's 2 weeks here. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's how science works.
Yeah, right. I'm wearing a lab coat that makes me a scientist. Anyway,
What does what I'm wearing make me?
a vampire.
Cool.
I was going to
Choice
say
for the job you
naked,
want.
Yeah. Well, is it me? Do I start? Oh,
but, I think we ended on Miller's turn last time.
oh, that's right, we did. You're right.
It's okay. Jonas is actually Miller. Plot twist.
Sorry, I think I might have to do this one, if only because I just found a story that talks about the narrator's missing husband, whose name is Rick, and it's just tickling me.
Okay.
But yeah, so we ended on my turn last time, so I guess, Rick, you're going to start us off.
But did you read the second time last time?
I read, yeah?
What were the stories you read last time?
See, I would like to scroll up and look at it, but unfortunately there's 1,000 satisfactory messages.
Yeah, we should make a
I
thread for
feel like you didn't go your second time last time, Miller. I'm pretty sure you did.
I'm sure it got to your turn, and then we had to
And then
stop
we-
because it was
yeah.
midnight.
that. I think Rick is correct.
That's fine. Alright then. Welcome, one and all, to the Midnight Society. For the approval of the Midnight Society, I present to you my missing husband came home, and I just know it isn't him. My husband went missing 6 months ago. Just went out to work one day and never came home. It was a horrible shock to the whole neighborhood, because things like that just didn't happen in our little slice of white picket fence suburbia. The police launched an investigation, and the neighborhood watch sent out search parties, but no one ever found any evidence to indicate what had happened to him. Our families were devastated. Recently, the missing posters have been taken down or papered over. The updates from the police became less frequent and dwindled away. I accepted that, as hard as it was to admit. My Rick wasn't coming back. Until he did. A week ago, I was in the back garden, watering my petunias, when I heard the garden gate creak open. I jerked my head in that direction, and there he was. Exactly the same as the day he disappeared. Same windswept blonde hair and bright blue eyes, same curl of his pink lips. I was in shock. Our families had mourned for him, and yet there he was, standing in our garden like he had just popped out of milk or something. When I asked where he had been, he said he didn't know. He couldn't remember anything about the last 6 months. All our family and friends were beside themselves with joy. They almost couldn't believe it. But that's just the thing. I don't believe it. Look, I understand how crazy this all sounds. I do. Our families would never believe me, and I can't go to the police unless I want to end up in a straitjacket. But I know that the man sleeping next to me isn't my husband. I don't know what to do. I know I should be happy, but I'm not. I'm terrified. I don't know how much about anything. About supernatural or paranormal. I don't even like watching horror movies. But something about this whole situation makes my skin crawl. Just let me explain why I'm so sure. Once I've done that, hopefully one of you will believe me, and you'll be able to tell me what to do. The morning after the Rick came home, I made him a cup of tea. When I handed it to him, he gave me the brightest smile. Then he took a sugar cube from the dish on the table and dropped it into the cup. Our house was in chaos with his return, and I was still in shock, so I didn't think much of it at the time. But it's been replaying in my mind ever since. I know it doesn't sound very significant, but my husband never put sugar in his tea. He was always adamant that it ruined the taste, and he'd get so frustrated if I ever put sugar in his cup by accident. And yet, this man had sugar. Then it was the golf. A few days ago, when he was out visiting his mom, I recorded a golf tournament that was showing on the TV. It was one of Rick's favorite golfers that was competing, and he never missed it. Once, he even skipped out on an anniversary dinner just to watch a championship. Only, when he came home from his parents and I told him what I'd done, he just seemed unbothered? Like, he said thanks and everything, and then he asked if I wanted to get dinner. He didn't even watch it. That's just so out of character for him. Then one night I woke up around 2 a.m. to see Rick's face inches from mine, just looking at me with these blank eyes. I kind of gave this nervous laugh and asked, "Baby, what are you doing?" And he didn't answer. For like a solid 30 seconds, he just stared, almost like he was looking right through me. Then he suddenly smiled and said, "Sorry, honey. Sometimes I just can't believe this is real." Then he rolled over and went to sleep. I didn't get much sleep after that myself. Yesterday, about a week after he came home, the neighborhood threw a street party to celebrate his return. Everyone from our street and the streets on either side turned up to see him and tell him how happy they were that he's alright. When he wasn't standing with his arm around my waist, he was milling around, chatting amicably to each and every one of our neighbors. Even the little kids. Jackson, our next-door neighbor Sally's toddler, wanted to play peekaboo. And Rick happily played along with a smile on his face. Now, my husband never did that. Rick always said he didn't like kids. That's why we never had any, and so he never wanted to play with any of the neighborhood children. Especially not Jackson. Rick all but avoided him. Before he disappeared, I had started to suspect it was so I wouldn't see them together and notice the subtle but unmistakable similarities. Final nail in the coffin, proverbially speaking, was Sally. Just this morning, she came knocking on our door. Her excuse was that the tray of brownies she carried, but I think she just wanted to push her way into our morning so that she could see for herself what the situation was. After she left, I called her a nosy busybody. Rick laughed, kissed my head, and agreed with me. That's when I knew for sure that it couldn't really be him. Rick always used to get so mad whenever I insulted Sally, like I didn't have any right to hate her even though she'd been fucking my husband for years. But today, there was none of that. He didn't even try to defend her. And I know what you might be thinking. If he was in an accident or something, he might have had some kind of traumatic brain injury that caused him to forget some things about his life. Maybe even change his personality. And that's a valid, reasonable explanation. I have no doubt it's what the police would tell me if I reported all this. But you know why I'm dead certain that man isn't my husband? He doesn't have a scar. If he was really Rick, he'd have a scar on the side of his forehead shaped like the golf club I hit him with. But there's nothing. Not a mark. Honestly, I'm this close to going out tonight digging out my petunias just to make sure he's still under there. I don't know what I'm sharing a bed with, but I know it's not my husband. So what the hell am I gonna do? Hi, everyone. I want to thank you all. Sorry, there's a part 2 to this, if you want me to keep going.
Oh, there is a part 2.
Yes.
Interesting. I've read this one before a good long while ago, but I'd never knew there was a second part.
Oh, go ahead.
Why not? We got a lot of time to fill tonight.
Yes.
Alright, so about a month later. Hi, everyone. I want to thank you all for your concern and support. Even though I'm not giving out my real name, I obviously took a huge risk by telling anyone this at all, and so I'm grateful you've all tried to help. I'm so sorry for the delay in updating. I've had some things to figure out. So I'll start with what I know. My husband is dead. In the end, I decided not to dig up the petunias. It was a rash, unadvisable notion which I have since abandoned because I realized how much worse things could get if I was caught. I've been smart about the whole thing so far, and I'm not about to throw that all away. It's too big of a risk. I did, however, thoroughly examine the flowers in the earth around them for any sign of disturbance. But I found none. Of course I found none. I don't know what I thought the hell had happened. That my garden was some sort of pet cemetery and my husband had clawed his way back from the beyond? Even to me, of all people, that sounds crazy. No, my husband is dead. In my heart, I know that beyond any shadow of a doubt. Which means that whoever's in my kitchen right now is a complete stranger. Number 2, he looks and sounds exactly like Rick. His own parents didn't even notice the difference, for heaven's sake. But he doesn't act like him at all. Which tells me again that he's a stranger, and that he never knew me before this. And he certainly never knew Rick. He doesn't enjoy the things Rick enjoyed. He doesn't say the sort of things Rick said. He doesn't complain, doesn't raise his voice, doesn't lie, or gaslight, or cheat. Frankly, he's a better husband than Rick ever was. Honestly, when I think about it like that, I'm almost tempted just to let it go. I tried to let it go, not to get caught up in worrying, and just accept my new life for what it is. But I found myself unable to let it go. Because even though this man seems ordinary and kind and reasonable, there's one thing that scares me still. For someone to have so confidently taken Rick's place, they would somehow have to be sure themselves that the real Rick would not return to complicate their plans, however innocent or sinister those plans might be. Whoever this man is, who is calling himself Rick, he must surely know that Rick is dead. And if he knows that, I would bet anything that he also knows how. I've gambled with my life and my freedom before, and I don't intend to do so again. A couple of you suggested that Rick might have had a twin that, for whatever reason, I never knew about. Or perhaps a doppelganger who saw his chance at a more comfortable life and took it. Either of these seemed to be the closest to the realm of possibility, so they were the first theories I set out to confirm or disprove. A DNA test would surely be able to confirm whether this man is my husband's twin or is someone completely unrelated. Of course, I was hardly going to tell him about it. At best, he would refuse, and at worst, well, I didn't want to find out. So about a week after my last post, I ordered 2 separate DNA tests designed for finding one's relatives and ancestors, and had them delivered whilst Rick was at work. Then a few nights later, I waited until he was asleep, actually asleep, not half asleep and staring, and I pulled out a few strands of his hair. Not enough that it would be noticeable in the morning, but sufficient amount to send away in a little tube to be analyzed. Much to my relief, he didn't wake up. I'm not sure how I would have explained it if he had. I sent the hair away to the DNA test companies, and they told me I'd have to wait a couple of weeks for the results. And in those couple of weeks, things have gotten stranger, let's say. You see, I've noticed that Rick never seems to eat of his own accord. Like, he'll make dinner for us both, but that seems more to do with when I mention that I'm hungry than with his own desire to eat. He doesn't snack between meals. He never goes for a glass of water. I don't even think he takes anything with him to work for lunch. There's something else, too. Rick's beard trimmer is still in its box, exactly where he left it 6 months ago, covered in dust and quite obviously unused. And yet Rick has been home for nearly a month and his beard doesn't seem to be any longer, even though he used to trim it twice a week. On top of that, the staring has become a frequent occurrence, and not just in the middle of the night. I catch him watching me during the day, too, always looking away or laughing it off whenever I notice him. Anyway, I might as well tell you why I'm writing this now, because I can't make head nor tail of the situation anymore. The DNA tests came back in the mail this afternoon before Rick came home from work. I opened them quickly, eager to see who was included in the list of relatives, whether any names are recognized. Either way, it would answer my question. Only, I don't have an answer. All I have are more questions, because the first test came back as inconclusive, with a note from the company telling me I had to send them a viable hair sample in order for it to work. I didn't understand that. I cut the hair myself. After all, what did they mean by viable? But it was the second test that concerned me the most. Where there should have been information about demographic and regional origin, there was nothing. Only a line of printed black letters spelling out the word unknown. Where there should have been a list of relatives and ancestors, there was no one. Not just no one related to Rick. No, I mean no one. According to the DNA test, this man had no relatives. No family, no ancestors, no biological connections near or distant. That should be impossible, right? How can a person exist without any kind of relation? And how can he come from nowhere? I'm typing this up on the computer in the study, with several tabs open on various Google searches as I try to figure out how this could be possible. The DNA test lies on the table behind me, taunting me with evidence of everything I do not know. Then I hear it, clear as day, coming from the doorway behind me. Rebecca? If I didn't know better, I'd say my heart stopped. I would know that voice anywhere. I never heard him come in, never even heard the door open. Dimly in the back of my mind, I recall that our door creaks every time it opens. How could I not have heard it? I turn over my shoulder towards the not Rick, a false, bright smile on his face. He's not smiling. His face is calm. There's something hard about the line of his mouth that sets me on edge. What the hell is this? His voice is perfectly level, but something about it makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There's an undertone to his voice that I haven't noticed before now. Something low and subtly grating. Even the real Rick never sounded like that. He holds something up, one eyebrow arched. When I see what he's holding, my stomach plummets. Results of the DNA test.
Dun dun dun.
Is that it?
That's it. There's no part 3.
Oh, okay.
Even though it does kind of leave off a cliffhanger there.
Yeah, I
When
was
was
sort of like,
part 2 written?
5 months ago.
Oh, well, sorry. There won't be a part 3 because she's dead.
I was all right. Well, I mean,
Should have
It's funny
ended
'cause
it
I-
on the first one. The second chapter doesn't add too much, and the first one has such a good twist at the end.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say the first one was where I would have stopped it. The second one's like, okay,
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever. I understand people wanting more, but yeah, you're right. It should have stopped. This was a one and done. Ah, well.
Because the second chapter is like it's just trying to like explain away the things. It's like, no, don't explain it. The fact that there's no
Yeah,
explanation
also-
is the creepy part.
Also, like, a murderer wouldn't casually continue talking to people online, being like, thanks for your support, guys.
really appreciate you all supporting my murder.
There's something really amusing to me about that.
Can you imagine if it just kept on going like parts 3, 4, and 5? It's just like really mundane details. Like, and then my fake husband took me to court, and it really sucked. And we had a divorce, and he started cheating on me with my doppelganger. Anyway,
The fake Rick starts cheating on real Rebecca with the Rebecca doppelganger.
Oh man, this is getting way too complicated. This is some Days of Our Lives shit right here.
anyway,
Me.
Hey.
Whose turn is it? Whose turn is it next?
It is my turn.
it's Rick.
Oh boy, it's Rick's. But is this the real Rick or the fake Rick? Check him for shovel marks. No, wait, it wasn't a shovel. It was a golf club. I'm still in Dracula daily mode. All right, I'm muting myself.
Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. A video oddity. SCP Foundation submission. Anomalous item 2224 is a series of 8 DVD-Rs containing unedited footage of an apparent nature documentary collectively labeled as Documentary 23. The picture and sound quality of the footage is substandard with audio-visual distortions, cuts, and missing footage common throughout the recordings. The disc will play on any standard DVD player, and the contained footage has been copied and archived. No anomalous effects have been recorded regarding the discs themselves or the act of watching them. While the possibility of a hoax exists, such an undertaking would require several $1 million to produce equivalent special effects. Anomalous item 2022-4 was recovered from Redacted on July 16, 20 Redacted. The previous owner was unaware of the object's origins, claiming to have received them through an anonymous seller on the internet. Anomalous item 2022-4 is currently stored in Low Security Vault 2 of Site 19. The following transcript lists only a general overview of the major events of note. Disc 1. Timecode 0. Disc starts. The scene shown resembles the Serengeti Plain. A large group of wildebeest, gazelles, zebras, and other savanna wildlife are shown around a watering hole. Timecode 12 seconds. The voices of filmmakers are heard for the first time. 3 distinct voices are heard, 1 female, 2 male, subjects 1, 2, and 3 respectively. The language spoken does not correlate with any known language and has only been partially decoded. The subjects seem to be describing the waterhole scene, as the camera focuses on the drinking animals. Narration of this kind continues throughout most of the other segments of Anomalous Item 2022-4. Timecode 5 minutes 15 seconds. Subjects 1 and 3 appear on camera. Both are wearing similar outfits, utilitarian clothing in various shades of brown with backpacks for carrying equipment and supplies. For unknown reasons, the subjects' faces have been blotted out. Documentary shifts focus to a nearby termite mound. The next 34 minutes and 6 seconds of tape contains no anomalous or otherwise notable content. Timecode 39:21. First anomalous content scene. At this point in the documentary, focus is set upon a small bird, which on closer inspection is clearly a blue jay, a.k.a. cristata. The bird displays no physical anomalies, besides being native to North America, not Africa. Timecode 40:05. Blue jay flies away. During the filming, the subjects did not seem to find the presence of a non-native bird confusing or remarkable. The next 19 minutes and 55 seconds of tape contains no anomalous or otherwise notable content. All animals featured show no unusual characteristics or behavior. 60 minutes, disc ends. Disc 2. Timecode 0. Disc starts. Scene shows a series of rocky foothills at the base of a mountain chain to the west. Scrub vegetation is common. Timecode 10 seconds. Camera focuses on a snake in the bush. Researchers note, identified as a western diamondback rattlesnake. Subject 3 grabs the snake by the tail and uses a stick to handle it for the camera as Subject 1 narrates. At 1 minute and 1 second, the snake is released. 1 minute, 1 second. Cut. Next shot is middle of the segment on a large ant colony. Ants are a light shade of blue. Timecode 1 minute 15 seconds. Camera focuses on a group of roughly 50 soldier ants attacking a giant reef 50 soldier ants attacking a reef gecko. Native to Florida, ants are tearing away chunks of flesh with their pincher-like jaws. The gecko survives for nearly a minute before one of the ants cuts the gecko's jugular vein. Timecode 2 minutes 12 seconds. Cut. Scene is now focusing on a pack of vultures feeding on the carcass of a large Bactrian camel. Timecode 5 minutes 36 seconds. Cut. The camel stands up and attempts to bite a vulture. The remains of the camel's internal organs are dangling from a hole in its abdomen. Timecode 5 minutes 45 seconds. Cut. There are no visuals for the next 10 minutes 45 seconds. Sound is in the form of 5 individual narrations or unknown subjects. Timecode 1621. Cut. Camera focuses on a red panda drinking from a shallow stream. The creature is estimated to be roughly the size of a Kodiak bear. Timecode 17 minutes. Red panda leaves the shot, but not before defecating on the stream's edge. Subject 1 makes a comment followed by laughter from subjects 2 and 3. Timecode 17:06. Disc ends. Disc 3. Timecode 0. Disc starts. Scene opens with Subject 2 in mid-sentence pointing the camera at a snowy cliffside roughly 100 to 150 meters tall. Subjects are seen wearing mountain climbing gear and appear to be discussing the best way to ascend the cliff face. Timecode 220. Subjects begin ascending the cliffside. Timecode 243. Cut. Following footage is a shot of the horizon from 2/3 up the cliffside. The savanna featured in Disc 1 can be seen in the distance. Timecode 256. Subject 2 is startled by sudden appearance of a large indistinct creature. Researchers note, believed to be a flying fox or similar large bat, and nearly drops the camera. Subject 3 scolds him while Subject 1 laughs. Timecode 3 minutes. Cut. Subjects are at the top of the cliff looking out over the edge. Judging by the shadows cast by the mountain, it is nearing mid-afternoon. Timecode 3 minutes 15 seconds. Cut. Scene takes place later that day near sundown. Subjects are walking up a winding dirt path. A small village can be seen ahead of them. Timecode 523. Subjects arrive in the village. Buildings are small and stone with wooden roofs. There are no signs of recent habitation. Many of the buildings are in a state of disrepair, and much of the village is covered in deep snowdrifts. Subjects walk through the village for the next 3 minutes and 40 seconds, conversing sporadically. No other life is seen. Timecode 903. Cut. Subjects are now approaching a larger building, a large section of which is collapsed and filled with snow. Subjects 1 and 3 step inside first. Subject 2 follows with the camera 4 seconds later. Timecode 907. Jump cut. Subjects are standing on top of a fallen chunk of masonry. A large swarm of black insects, researchers note. Further analysis suggests that the creatures resemble terrestrial trilobites rather than any known insect. Each at least 30 centimeters in length, swarms around beneath them. Subject 3 opens his backpack, taking out a plastic box. Checking its contents once, he throws it across the hall. The swarm moves toward the box and begins consuming it. The camera lingers on the creatures as the subjects escape. Timecode 956. Cut. Subjects are inside another building, and it is now night. The house's fire pit has been cleared out, and a fire has been set up. Subject 1 is feeding a black furred chinchilla some of her rations, while Subject 3 narrates. Timecode 1028. Disc ends. Disc 4. Timecode 0. Disc starts. Subjects are walking through a thick forest of large fungal bodies. Judging by the slope of the ground, it is presumed that the subjects are descending the foothills on the opposite side of the mountain. Available light indicates it is mid-morning or mid-afternoon. Timecode 15 seconds. Movement is spotted to the right. Camera focuses on a dark shape moving deeper into the forest and out of sight. Researchers note. Further analysis shows that the creature is a quagga, a relative of the zebra, which has been extinct since 1883. One frame seems to show the creature unfurling wings, but the footage is too blurred to confirm this. Timecode 45 seconds. Cut. Scene shows a stone pillar, which has been partially eroded by approaching hi-fi. The pillar is clearly a marker of some sort, and Subject 1 is attempting to decode the symbols that are etched into it. Timecode 1 minute 30 seconds. Subject 1 now steps away from the pillar. Judging by her tone of voice, she was incapable of translating any of the symbols. Subjects move onward through the forest. Timecode 241. There is a heavy seismic disturbance. The camera becomes unsteady as Subject 2 stumbles. The fungal trees can be seen to sway in uniform motion. Timecode 244. The next 10 seconds contain no visuals or audible sound. Analysis has shown an ultrasonic note within the blank segment. As it does not vary in frequency, it is hypothesized to be artificial in origin. Timecode 254. Cut. Subject 1 is now observing a large black beetle. Every few seconds she prods it with a twig. After she does this several times, the beetle flares its carapace outwards, showing the brilliant orange-yellow coloration underneath. Timecode 340. The beetle sprays a yellow-green fluid from its abdomen at Subject 1, who doesn't step away quick enough to avoid the acid. He shouts in pain and attempts to wipe it off. Subject 3 steps in to help her. Timecode 402. Cut. Scene now shows a shallow gully, populated by a species of cup-shaped fungi, the smallest being a meter across. Subject 2 sets the camera on a tripod and walks away. No unusual events are recorded over the next 14 minutes and 12 seconds. Timecode 1814. A juvenile Javanese rhinoceros walks into the gully, sniffing the air. It makes a direct route toward one of the larger cup fungi and walks inside. The cup closes over it, and sounds of distress are heard from within after a few seconds. The silhouette of the rhinoceros inside the fungus can be seen as it struggles to free itself. Timecode 1920. Disc ends. Disc 5. Timecode 0. Disc starts. Scene shows the subjects are on the shore of a lake. Local geography resembles the American Southwest, with thick scrub vegetation and several clumps of tamarisk on the lakeshore. Subject 3 is filling a canteen from the lake. Timecode 30 seconds. Subject 3 points out a disturbance behind the camera. Camera turns to see a group of about 15 lemur-like creatures emerging from the brush, roughly 20 meters away. Camera zooms in to show they are walking on their hind legs and are carrying sharpened sticks. The tribe ignores the presence of the subjects. Timecode 54 seconds. The tribe begins to drink from the lake. Subject 1 makes a short narrative comment showing some surprise at the event, but only enough to suggest that this is a rare find. She continues with the narration as usual. Timecode 2 minutes and 3 seconds. The tribe's lookout makes a startled yelp. The other lemurs take notice. Timecode 2 minutes 4 seconds. A dromaeosaurid dinosaur of considerable size, researchers note, believed to be an adult Utahraptor, appears. Subjects begin to run away. Sounds of the conflict can be heard over the subject's footsteps. Timecode 2:25. Camera is directed back at the tribe. Lemurs have now either run away or been killed. The Utahraptor is feeding on the dead. Timecode 3 minutes 13. Scene now shows a dinosaur dead on the ground with numerous bullet holes in its head and chest area. Subject 1 is scolding Subject 3, who is seen disassembling a long-barreled rifle. Timecode 3:20. Cut. Subjects have walked down the eastern shore of the lake. There are some unusual disturbances in the water. This continues for the next 1 minute 36 seconds. Timecode 4:04. A Megatherium, giant ground sloth, which is seen to have 6 limbs instead of 4, approaches the lake shore from the brush. After looking around the area, it bends down to drink. Timecode 4:56. Disturbances in the water increase as a large creature emerges from the lake. As only the upper portion is visible, identification is difficult. A membranous dome, lined by numerous frills of skin and cartilage, is visible. The skin is semi-transparent, showing a bulbous structure underneath. Visible are several triple-jointed arms. Researchers note 5 limbs have been counted, which have thick black fur and hands with 2 opposable thumbs. Timecode 4:59. Unknown creature lashes its arm at the area behind the sloth, attacking a pack of raptors much like the one before, which were preparing to launch an attack on the sloth. Timecode 5:12. Unknown creature grabs a raptor in one of its hands and throws it toward the subjects, who it misses by no less than a meter. Camera moves to look at the body. The spine has been snapped on impact. Timecode 5:17. Cut. Subjects have left the lake behind and are now climbing over a short ridge. Animal noises can be heard from the other side. Timecode 5:18. Disc ends. Disc 6. Timecode 0. Disc starts. Video shows subjects are traversing a salt plain on foot. Sky is overcast and dark. No life can be seen anywhere. Timecode 7 seconds. Subject 3 begins to speak. The conversation is casual and continues for the next 12 minutes without notable events. Timecode 12 minutes 7 seconds. Cut. Conversation is still ongoing, though Subject 1's tone has become increasingly worried. Timecode 12:55. Argument between Subjects 1 and 3 breaks out. Subject 2 steps in, attempting to break it up. Timecode 13:12. Cut. Conversation has ended. Subjects appear weary. Distant thunder is heard in the background. The camera pans to show 2 unknown creatures. Researchers note, creatures are estimated to be between 200 and 250 meters tall, on the southern horizon. From the distance, they appear to be masses of cartilage and gas sacs at least 5 stories tall. Subject 1 speaks, but is interrupted by the low roar in the distance. The subjects look to the east, then at each other. Subject 3 speaks briefly, and the group resumes walking. Timecode 14:04. Disc ends. Disc 7. Data lost. The disc has been overwritten with several episodes of the anime Cowboy Bebop. Closer inspection has shown several one-frame fragments of the original video that remain. Timecode 9 minutes 33 seconds. A forest of crooked leafless trees. Part of a bleached skeleton of unknown origin is seen in the corner of the frame. Timecode 26:01. Shot was taken within a small clearing containing 6 boulder-sized pearls which provide ambient light through unknown means. The clearing is within a dense formation of jagged limestone towers known as tsingy. Timecode 2750. 2 frames of a bloated, worm-like creature with 3 flexible proboscises covered in feathered tufts. Timecode 4427. A dark blue screen filled with complex mathematical formulae appearing in white Arabic numerals. Timecode 5414. The final segment lasts for approximately 3 seconds. The soundless footage is too shaky for any conclusive analysis, but it would appear that Subject 2 is running up a steep incline at substantial speed with the camera rolling. Timecode 5502. Static. Faint screams and gunfire can be heard beneath the white noise. A voice identified as Subject 2 can be heard shouting before being drowned out. Timecode 5546. Disc ends. Disc 8. Timecode 0 seconds. Disc starts. Scene shows subjects slowly descending a rocky slope towards a bottom of a small valley. There is no plant life to be seen. There is a substantial amount of smog and dust in the air, giving a red-brown color to the sky. Timecode 4 seconds. Camera focuses on the bottom of the valley, observing a large settlement. Shacks are constructed primarily of corrugated sheet metal and are built several layers thick. Some figures can be seen around the edge of the settlement. Timecode 9 seconds. Cut. Subjects have reached the bottom of the incline and are standing roughly 10 meters from the edge of the slum. This distance, the conditions within the settlement are seen in detail. The narrow space between shacks are lined with sewage and large patches of gray lichen or fungus. Roughly 20 inhabitants can be seen, though they pay no attention to the subjects. The inhabitants are human, and their appearance is consistent with the living conditions around them. They are filthy, dressed in rags, malnourished, and many sport deformities. They walk without any seeming purpose, noticing little, if any, of their surroundings. Timecode 12 seconds. Subjects start walking slowly toward the settlement's edge. Inhabitants still show no signs of notice. Timecode 15 seconds. One of the slum inhabitants, male with severe deformities, sharply turns his head to face the camera. Timecode 16 seconds. Inhabitant begins running towards the subjects. Timecode 19 seconds. Inhabitant begins attacking subjects, screaming, let us go, you sick fucks." Timecode 23 seconds. A mob has formed around the subjects who attempt to fight them off. Timecode 25 seconds. Camera is knocked out of Subject 2's hand and records the mob's feet for 7 seconds afterwards. Screams can be heard off-screen. Timecode 32 seconds. Disc ends. That's the end.
Wow. There were parts of it that felt like an edgier Land of the Lost. But
An edgier Land of the Lost. I enjoy that description.
that was like a whole series pitch, man.
You're a series pitch.
I'm trying to figure out what the context of this thing is, what it's trying to do. Is it like anything it records? Anything the camera records just gets like stuck in the recording forever? Like it'll just keep reappearing when the recording starts again?
No.
Yeah,
I just want to know
it.
which episodes of Cowboy Bebop it recorded.
Yeah.
Also, I need to know more about the lemurs. Can I be real? I need to know a lot more about the lemurs.
I was curious about that too.
Like, I want a whole documentary just about this lemur tribe.
Cavemen Ringle. They had dinosaurs when they could barely talk.
I think it's kind of funny that like the creepy old media trope is now DVDs. That's really weird. When I was a kid, it was like it's like film, like reels of film. That would be the old creepy thing. And then for a while,
I mean, it's
See, and then when I was
most of the time,
when I was like during most of my life, it's the haunted VHS, stuff like The Ring.
Yeah, like The Ring, right.
And now we're reaching the point where it's becoming DVDs.
Like any physical media at this point.
Yeah. In another 20 years,
they can have my physical media when they pry it from my cold, dead hands. Anyway, go on, Jonas.
In another 20 years, it's going to be haunted Twitch streams.
It's gonna be you look at your credit card statement and there's a bill for like a service you don't remember doing, and you go to like look it up online and it doesn't appear on Google, and you have to like go directly to the link that's on your bill, and you find this dark web streaming service that has all these haunted things.
Haunted, unlisted YouTube video.
I was gonna say, like, the way that story was going, I was just gonna be like, this just ends in porn, doesn't it?
You receive a strange invoice in your email.
Go, Brandon!
What?
Nothing, never mind.
Ron Rab is continuing the gift sub they got from Jadi Zaid.
Oh,
Thank you, Ron Rab, for the subscription.
thank you very much. Thank you very much. I know I sound like Elvis there. Anyway.
Your face.
Well, thank you very much. You got some peanut butter and bananas. I can really go for a sandwich right now.
Ugh.
What's wrong, Jonas? Don't you like peanut butter and banana sandwiches?
That's a whole other. Actually, it does sound kind of good. Peanut butter banana sounds good. The other one where it's like peanut butter and jelly burger sounds horrible.
What about Weird Al with his Twinkie wiener sandwiches?
No.
I mean, that was just for the movie, wasn't it? Has he ever said he like actually?
I think he's still. I mean, he actually had to eat them for the movie.
Oh, that's weird.
And I think, well, I mean, yeah, they don't call him Normal Al. I
They
think
also
he
don't call him Weird Radcliffe, but here we are.
God.
And I think he still eats them, but he's a vegetarian now, so he has to do like veggie wieners.
Vegan drink.
No, he's not a vegan. He said he can't give up cheese.
Oh.
That's
I was gonna say, how
unreasonable.
do you do a Twinkie with like the whipped topping?
No, he still does dairy. And he said, and his wife and daughter, the way he says it, they don't have the same diet as he does. He calls them vegetarians that just eat a lot of meat. Anyway, whose turn is it next?
Your turn, Stoker.
It's my turn. Oh boy!
Oh boy!
All right, I picked one. It's a little on the longer side. Probably take me at least 15 minutes to read it. I don't know. I was on the fence about including it, but there are a couple of things in this that made me have to include it. So I think you'll see why. Anyway, this one is called. Oh, and this is a very recent one. It was posted yesterday. This one is called Halloween, When the Masks Come Off. It has been a long time since I reveled in the fears of those I used to prey on. It could be said that I reformed from my old ways. Well, the old ways of my kind, not just my own. There was a time when I enjoyed the hunt even more than the meal, but I suppose I matured sometime over the centuries. Oh yes, I am ancient. Ancient to your perception of the world, of the word anyway. To my kind, I am still quite young, and there are even far older things than us, I can promise you that. Humanity has barely scraped the surface of the mysteries this world truly holds, and mine are only slightly ahead of you in such knowledge, truth be told. There are many things that you got right about us, yet so many that you have gotten wrong. First and foremost, we are not attractive by your standards. To my people, I am a fairly average-looking individual, one who can easily blend into a crowd. I would find it significantly more difficult to blend in with your people, but it can be done. It does take focus, mind you. We're not shapeshifters the way you understand it, but we can influence how you see us. It was not easy at first, but I have grown quite talented in the act, as I do enjoy walking in the human world when I can. Perhaps that is what led to my, shall we call it, rehabilitation? Oh yes, in my younger years I would feast on you by the dozens without batting an eye. Over time, however, I think humankind began to grow on me. It was the children, I believe. Regardless of how sinister I may have appeared in your eyes, I would never feed on a child. Even when I saw you as little more than cattle, I could never end the life of an innocent. Perhaps I just never had the appetite for the taste of the pure of heart. It could be that the dregs of humanity have a more potent flavor. That being said, I will not pretend that I have never quenched my appetite on a harmless adult. Very few were off limits to me in my youth, as I considered your kind, well, beneath me. Though there are aspects of society that still disgust and confuse me, I no longer think of you all in such a manner. There are some, of course, but I no longer take the life of anyone unless I feel that they deserve it. There will always be filth to serve my needs, and I do enjoy the flavor. It has probably been some 300 years or so since I adjusted my outlook. I even took a human mate for a time. Her children were a delight to spend time with, even though they could see behind my illusion. Perhaps not the entirety of the real me, so to speak. Pure hearts can figure out the truth of things so much easier than the corrupt. Adulthood inherently brings with it a certain degree of corruption to even the most innocent of souls. It is just the nature of things, I would think. We see the world for what it is when we grow up, no longer just how we want it to be. I grew very fond of Abigail, my mortal companion, and her 2 little ones. I stayed with them for many years, but ultimately I would leave them before the years weaved their unfortunate spells on their frail mortal shells. I think it was curiosity more than anything that led me to live in the mortal world for those years. I was fascinated by your ways, though I did not fully understand them. My people have little in the way of emotions, so we are not blank slates, as many would believe. I think we have many aspects that would appear quite foreign to you, aside from just the obvious physical appearance. We do not age in the same manner that you do. I suppose that can be taken for granted from the words I have spoken so far. We do have diseases and mental ailments, but they differ greatly from anything you could relate to. Another misconception about us is that we can transform your kind into ours. Our blood can carry pathogens that can lead mortals to crave that which we feed on, but it is more of a condition than an alteration. It frees the soul from the body, leaving only a walking shell. This remaining husk requires living sustenance to survive. My community has actually taken great offense to cults that have formed from such a disease. They would claim to be our equals, but they have no manner of understanding how far off they are in their assessment. Yes, should they continue to feed, they will live indefinitely. Surely they will be more impervious to bodily harm, along with the ability to heal certain wounds after suffering damage. It is still something more likened to donning a costume and playing a part than becoming anything like my kind. We can go without feeding for many years, should we choose. Unfortunately, this would render us with similar weaknesses to those of your kind, but it has been known to happen. We can even feast on the traditional delicacies of the mortal world, should we choose, though we would reap little benefits from it. I must confess, I am quite fond of such things as your fried chicken and the occasional steak. Although I do like to walk amongst your people, the focus it takes to keep my appearance hidden requires a great deal of effort the longer I maintain it. This is why I have grown to thoroughly enjoy the festivities of All Hallows' Eve. It is the only time of the year that I can allow my true face to be observed and cause no more than a fleeting fright to those who may look upon it. It is a manner of freedom that my kind rarely gets to experience. I like walking the streets and enjoying the laughter of the children, though I find my eyes rolling at the sight of the older youths. The late teenage girls dressed in their skimpiest outfits regardless of how cold the outside air feels to them. The teenage boys wearing idiotic parody costumes that only serve to make fun of others. The smaller children show so much more class than the older ones. In recent years, there has grown an unsettling trend amongst some of the young people who attend a nearby university. They have proven to be quite the foul and useless examples of humanity who only enjoy bringing anguish to others. I have observed them from a distance over the months in an attempt to understand their motivations. They call their actions practical jokes, and they even record them on their little devices that are rarely far from their grasp. They publish their clips on a variety of your internet pages, and I have observed others marvel at their works. I watch your world and attempt to understand your ways, but some things make very little sense to me, I must say. Though, I have grown quite fond of your World Wide Web. Many of my peers mock my interest in your society, but most of them still cling to the old ways. They see you as little more than animals who have overtaken the land and forced us underground. I have attempted to convince them that we may still share the surface world, but they refuse to use our inherent abilities to blend in amongst you. They know all too well how mankind treats those they do not understand, and we have lost legions over the centuries to your fearful throngs. Those tales may lie in your books of fables and myths, but they show so much more clearly in our encyclopedias. Regardless of our shared history, I bear you no ill will. Were my kind greater in number, though, I imagine they would force all of you away from the light and into the caverns that we dwell within. There are so few of us left, and I believe it would be best if we could find a common ground after all these years. The group of miscreants I spoke of earlier apparently grew tired of badgering their own peers and set their sights on the children of this city. As the Halloween season approached, I witnessed some of the youths in masks, leaping from trees to terrify young boys and girls who happened by. They succeeded in causing a little girl to cry while I watched on from the shadows one evening. She fell to the ground and tore a deep gash into the flesh of her little knee. She wept while a taller child, presumably her sibling, crouched beside her in an attempt to calm her down. The teenagers in the grotesque masks only laughed at the two of them and slapped their hands together, seemingly celebrating their defeat of such an innocent victim. I donned my most innocent and friendly face before making my way out of the darkness to greet them. I attempted to reason with the older youths and convince them that scaring little ones was no way to feel better about their own miserable lives. This only served to bring them more levity as they strolled away, reveling in their victory. I helped the crying little girl back to her feet and attempted to assist her brother in calming her down. Unfortunately, I only scared her more at first. She could see the shadow behind my veil, though just a hint of it. After a moment, she could sense that I meant her no harm, and she offered me a delightful smile for my efforts. She asked me what I was, an inquiry which caused her brother to study me more. He also saw beneath my mask, but he did not flee in terror. I basked in their wonderful presence over the passage of mere moments in time as I escorted them back to their home, after a small stop-off at a nearby ice cream shop. It is truly magical to me that children can have the ability to see beneath the flesh. I know my appearance can tear into the bravest of man, but to a child I am but a curiosity. Before I bid the two good night, they spoke of the variety of attacks these immature teenagers had been inflicting on others. It had become a tradition of theirs these past few Halloween seasons. The two children seemed to regain their fear of me for a moment when I bit into my thumb before their eyes. I had learned to control the toxins running through my veins over the centuries, so I would be able to repress any contagions, should I choose. I allowed one single drip to fall from my fingertip into the little girl's open wound. She and her brother marveled at the sight of her gash closing shut, leaving no scar behind or any trace of damage to her flesh. She wrapped her tiny arms around my neck and rewarded me with a small peck of her lips on my scaled and hardened cheek. This caused a warmth to spread through my chest that I had not felt since I played in the fields with Abigail's son and daughter so many years before. I assured the two that the pranksters would learn the error of their ways very soon. I continued to observe the group of older teenagers over the following days. I watched from afar as they harassed so many more of the town's children. I watched on while the 5 of them laughed so much harder when they caused the little ones to fall to the ground. I felt a rage build from within me that I had not felt in decades. Though their actions angered me, I had no intention of bringing them any more than a simple fright. That was, until they provoked a throng of small children to flee from their display, causing a few of them to slip and fall down a nearby hill. The 2 small boys and 1 little girl became silent when they made contact with the ground below. I leaped down after them, still hearing the laughter of their attackers from above. My bloodlust boiled over, and I fought it. I fought against the building urge to strike. I reached the trio on the lumpy ground at the base of the hill. All of them had gashes and cuts across their faces and limbs. The smaller boy had broken both of his legs, while the other boy and girl had suffered fractures of wrists and shins. Once more I allowed droplets of my blood to fall into open wounds. Their small bodies contorted as they repaired themselves from within. Though the bones would heal, I had to assist in snapping them back into place before my blood fixed them at the unusual angles they lay in. Though the 3 were unconscious, they still winced and moaned from the pain I was forced to inflict upon them. This was only to help them, but I still felt a stab of guilt for causing them harm. The children would heal and remain unaware of my involvement, but this would not quench my thirst for vengeance. Perhaps I would return to the old ways one last time. The night of Halloween arrived, and the hateful teenagers spread their malice to any children who crossed their path. I followed close behind, having taken the form of vapor to remain unseen. Every fright they caused and every torment they provided only served to fuel my rage. I would stalk them through the night, but I would not strike until they were away from the children. I fought against my desire to shred their throats in front of the little ones, but my intent was not to traumatize the innocent. Still, their simple pranks may seem trivial to some, but to a child, they cut so much deeper. The pack of hooligans made their way into the woods. Perhaps they sought to find more prey behind the cover of the trees. Maybe they had had their fill for the night and decided to take the shorter route back to their dorm rooms. Their reasons made no difference to me. This would be where I would strike. They enjoyed bringing fear to the innocent, but I adored providing terror to the hateful. I followed behind, still in my misty form. I reached out to snap the occasional tree branch to revel in their alarmed glances behind them. All 5 were draped in tattered robes and rubbery masks. The tallest one pulled off his face covering to reveal widened eyes when I snapped a long branch from a tree only feet behind them. As they quickened their pace, I knew my plan was proving fruitful. I spread my vaporous form as widely as I could to sever a circle of dry, rotted limbs around them. They all cascaded to the ground, landing in intermittent intervals after bouncing in and out of other branches on their descent. The quintuplets stopped and darted their heads around them in all directions. They spoke softly to each other as they turned around, seemingly intent on making their way back out of the forest. They moved quickly, but I moved faster. I scattered limbs before them and to their sides, causing them to travel the path that I desired. They would not be leaving this forest until I was finished with them. With my guidance, they buried themselves deeper into the dense woods until I was satisfied they were safely away from prying eyes. Now the bloodletting could begin. They had all pulled off their masks as the rubbery material had apparently restricted their flow of oxygen while their pace hastened. This was good. I wanted to see the expressions on their faces. I severed one last small and slender tree branch and sent it flying towards the tall one who was the first to remove his false face. He screamed in delicious agony when the jagged limb penetrated his left thigh. I made sure to avoid any arteries, as I had not yet decided if they would be allowed to survive this encounter. The boy fell to his knees, gripping his hands tightly around his leaking wound. The other four ran to his side while darting their eyes across the darkened trees. I wanted so badly to make my appearance and introduce them all to a horror they could not fathom, but the moment had not arrived just yet. They still sought rational explanations for the broken slice of wood that spouted from an oozing thigh. I split a variety of many sizes of limbs, causing them to shatter into splinters. I rained them down upon the 5 waiting victims like a storm that had erupted from above them. They all screamed in unison as thorn slivers buried into their flesh, bringing thin streams of crimson to leak slowly down their faces and arms. The thin strips were not strong enough to penetrate their extravagant clothing, but severe damage was not the purpose of this. Oh yes, they were afraid now. They screamed into the night as they gathered their friend from the forest floor. They all wore wounds now, but none were significant enough to cause any more than light scarring. They all fled in the same direction, and it was just about time for me to introduce myself. Though my body was gaseous at the moment, I could still feel the tingles of anticipation. It had been so long since I hunted for anything more than sustenance. I forgot how thrilling it could be. I shot ahead of them to prepare for my arrival. Turning myself to vapor did not allow my body to be clothed, as inorganic material could not be transformed. Somehow I thought my nudity would be just as unsettling to my prey as my scaled flesh. What would they notice first, I wondered? Would it be my yellowed eyes glowing in the moonlight? Perhaps my rows of jagged teeth behind the grayed flesh of my lips? The claws that tore through the skin of my elbows and knees? Or the twin spikes of my shoulders? It may even be the talons on the tips of my 3-fingered and dual-thumbed hands that would catch their eye. I was enjoying this way more than I expected. I stood several yards in front of them when I made my body corporeal again. Transforming back to the flesh would always leave my skin slick and moist as though layered in sweat. I held my arms slightly outwards with my talons spread wide, keeping my head lowered so that my thick, dark hair would hang low on my face, revealing only the glow of my eyes through the strands. I even erected the fleshy wings from my veined and muscled back to allow my vast wingspan to prove that what they were seeing was far from human. I felt the ground beneath my feet vibrate as they skidded to a halt before me. Every one of them began to tremble, and a couple of them allowed their bowels and bladders to give in to the fear. Huddled together, they began to gradually back away, as though they thought I may not have noticed their arrival. I allowed my voice to devolve back into the guttural and wailing sounds of the golden age of my kind.
"Do not turn away from me,"
I demanded, feeling my body shake with anticipation.
"If you flee, you will never leave this forest again."
Of course, they still attempted to run, but I would have hoped for no less. This is where the real fun begins. I chose to soar towards the two who ran together first. The long-haired boy kept his arm wrapped around the taller one with the twig still protruding from his leg. I picked them both up with my taloned feet and raised them high above the trees. They screamed and writhed in my firmly grasping toes until I released my grip and allowed them the freedom they fought for. Their blood still dripped from my talons, which had pierced into the tender flesh of their shoulders. I briefly entertained the notion of letting them crash into bloody heaps on the firm ground below, but they would never learn their lesson through a terminal series of broken bones and twisted meat. I quickly descended towards them and regained my grip on the already shredded tissue I had grasped before. We were close to the forest floor when I caught them, but I slowed their approach before releasing them once more to shatter bones against the hard bark of the trees. They lay still and unconscious, but I could still hear their beating hearts. I retracted my wings and sprinted on all fours towards the 3 others who had escaped into the forest. I could smell their fear and feces, so they would not stay ahead of me for long. I leaped on top of the heavy boy with shaggy hair, snapping both of his shins as I pinned him to the ground. He spat as he screamed an assortment of curses, and I watched several strands of his hair turn pure white when I disjointed my jaw and allowed it to fall wide and open like the gaping maw of a hungry shark. The pure joy I felt in his terror was momentarily interrupted by my desire to bite out his throat and feel his spewing fluids spraying into my mouth. I fought the urge, as these foul individuals did not deserve a bloody death for their insults and pranks. They did, however, deserve to observe firsthand what fear truly looks like. I twisted my jaw back shut while the boy prayed to whatever god he found holy to allow his life to continue. I wrapped my hand around his face, allowing my talons to tear holes into his forehead and cheeks. I pounded his head into the ground until he lost consciousness, leaving a bloody reminder of what he saw this night. Only the pair who took the foreground on the prank against the little girl and her brother remained. The others had watched and laughed at their actions, but I saw this final couple to be the leaders of this band of hooligans. They always began the assaults and reveled most in the tears and injuries of the children. Their price would be the steepest to pay. Would I take limbs, perhaps? Leave them horrifically scarred and unfit for life among other humans? The options were many, but my time was short. Maybe we start small and see how it goes. Were my flesh capable of producing goosebumps, I imagine I would be sporting quite a few right now. I vaporized again to continue my pursuit in silence. I needed to get them together again. A nudge here and there should do the trick. I scattered more branches to guide their path once more. I even allowed parts of me to solidify to gently push them in the direction I wanted. The woods were quite dense in places, so I would lead them to a clearing. I would even allow them a moment to think they had eluded me. This was the most fun I'd had in centuries. As planned, the two found themselves in a wide-open area in the center of the forest, having the belief that they had arrived there of their own volition. I chose to observe from high above after they stopped running and caught their breath. They embraced each other and spoke of what they had seen. They spun theories of elaborate makeup and costume design while taking no time to inquire into the condition of their associates. It was as though they had completely slipped from their memory. They perched down beside the thin stream that ran through the clearing, washing their faces and drinking from the water in their cupped hands. The forest had fallen silent, as my presence often had that effect on the wildlife of such places. They sensed what I was and kept themselves hidden when my kind was nearby. Had these teenagers the same instincts, they may have been able to shield themselves from me. I softly allowed my gaseous form to descend to where the two sat side by side. The parting of the trees allowed the moonlight to illuminate the clearing and reflect in the water of the stream. I began to solidify, but once more remained silent behind my waiting prey. They sat by the stream, gazing into the night. If all went as I hoped, they would not notice me until their eyes met the reflective pool bearing my image behind them. I watched as their posture stiffened as, eventually, they felt the presence of something at their backs. I watched the water reveal their eyes, gazing down upon it. They appeared too frightened to even move, which both delighted me and caused my heart to sink ever so slightly. My pursuit had come to a close, and this would be the final act of the night's festivities. The taller of the two slowly turned to face me. His eyes met my midsection, which paralleled his gaze. He turned his head gradually upwards to stare into my face. I wore a wide smile that bared each and every one of my razor-sharp teeth. Drool seeped from my mouth and dripped from my chin and onto my chest. It joined with my scaled flesh that was still moistened from my transition back to a solid form. I heaved with mimicked breath, as I did not need oxygen to fill my non-existent lungs. I wanted to appear feral and ravenous to the two cowering teenage boys who had brought such misery to the children of this small town. I looked on as they trembled in more visceral and blood-curdling terror than their little minds knew how to reckon with. I drank in their fear, and it nourished me far more than any meal could ever hope to. Both of the boys faced me now. They adjusted their posture to prop upon their knees while they begged their gods to spare their worthless lives. I stretched one single arm out in front of me. They wailed and bargained with me to spare them, which only drove rage deeper into my ancient soul. With one single grasp, I snatched the quivering lumps of flesh before me from the ground on which they knelt. I gouged both of the taloned thumbs of my left hand into one of each of their eyes, and they screamed in agony and shock. I did not push my fingers deep enough to penetrate their fragile brain tissue, though I cannot say the thought did not cross my mind. My immense and powerful wings beat against the air of the clearing as I lifted them high above the tree line. The two writhed and wailed while I held them still outstretched before me. I watched the fear grip their remaining eyes as they begged harder than before for me to spare their worthless lives. For a moment, I found great temptation to feed on their fragile bodies, to bury my sharp teeth deep into their flesh and quench my thirst on the life force they still held within. A fresh meal was not the purpose of this endeavor, nor was ridding humanity of these trembling specimens. The deep gashes I clawed into their chests and midsections while we hovered above the forest below were only to allow them to always remember our meeting. They would never be able to read the words I carved into their skin. It was an ancient and long-forgotten language that only my kind would be able to decipher. Roughly translated, their flesh now bore variations of the words filth and free meal. I even sliced my name into them, like a painter autographing their work. I swiftly dropped them back to the earth below and released the two above the rocks and pebbles that surrounded the stream. When they awoke, they could clean their wounds in the rippling water, but they would always bear the marks I branded them with. Their newfound lack of depth perception would also remind them never to revisit their old and immature ways. I stared at their twitching bodies next to the deceased and dried leaves of the woods. I felt proud of the deeds I had accomplished this night, and I rewarded myself with a snack. The two fresh eyeballs that still sat impaled on my taloned thumbs. I plucked them off and chewed them up, savoring the delicacy I had not enjoyed in many moons. The hour had grown late, but I still had time to stroll through the city streets and breathe in the remaining hours of my beloved Halloween. Tomorrow I would don my mask again, but tonight I would walk proudly among the people of this world. It has been almost a year since that night, and the 5 teenagers remain in one of your mental facilities. Of course, nobody believes the tale they spun of the terrors they experienced, but they do tell an interesting story. I still look in on them from time to time. I even allow them to see my face peering through the window when I feel like I could use a little levity. Their reactions are truly priceless. I still watch over the wonderful children of this small town, and their smiling, playful faces continue to remind me of why I gave up my ancient ways. Halloween is upon us again, and all I ask is that you remember this. Should you choose to prey on others this season, pay attention to those walking the streets beside you. Perhaps not all of the grotesque and monstrous faces you will look upon are made of latex and plastic. Maybe some of them are not as forgiving as I.
You know, it's an entirely different experience when it's being told from the point of view of the monster. Because, like, it's just sort of like, no, everything was tasty, and boy, you humans are stupid. You know? Like,
That's one of the reasons I decided to go with that one. I was reading it, I'm like, it's not really scary per se, because it's from the monster's perspective.
it's like
and
listening
it's
to...
very graphic, but
Yeah,
I was
it's
like,
like listen-
well...
It's a bit like listening to Hannibal monologue, you know? you know? It's just...
Oh yeah, like when I used to watch his cooking show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I naked bat monster attacks
Yeah.
people in the woods. It's
Yeah.
like,
The physical descriptions there were very interesting because I could not narrow down all the influences.
yeah, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot to unpack there.
I'm still just like the koala hands were the thing that got me. I'm just like wait, what? 3 fingers, 2 thumbs? What?
It's a drop bear. Okay, this is what a drop bear looks like.
I mean, that's honestly what I thought it was at a certain point. I'm like, wait, is this supposed to be like an Australian vampire? And they're like, are they supposed to be a drop bear? Like, is this what it is?
well,
that gonna be the reveal?
He did say that he enjoys the occasional steak. Maybe he hits up the Outback Steakhouse.
Okay.
Anyway, I believe it's someone else's turn now.
It is Jonas's turn.
Oh, yes, well. Okay, so this is it's a very special episode. This story, I actually asked Greg Luterman to write a story set in the Haven Celestia universe. That's the universe, I think most of you know it, but that's the universe created by Greg and Rick. It's a kind of a galaxy of, furry races being oppressed by the Kraken, which are these, large reptilian things. This story is set aboard the White Flower 2, a slave ship crewed by Garou, which are a kangaroo-like marsupial race. The captain is Itiri, and the commander is Jakari, who's also his mate. There. You've got all the info. Let me just pull this right up. 1 second. And here we go. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. This one doesn't actually have a title other than creepypasta.
We'll figure out a title by the time you're done reading.
All right. Jakari scrolled down through the task roster, making sure that she'd assigned someone to every important task. Oh, hon, she said, not looking up. I sent a crew down to 20401. Oh, her mate asked absently. He was sitting across from her at the officers' conference table located just off the ridge. The one-eyed guru had been studying a report from the agriculture deck about some fungi that had been rotting the Bencardo harvest. 20401? She set the tablet down. Yeah, the gas leak in 20401, she explained. I sent a crew to find and fix it. Now, Atiri set his tablet down. Gas leak. I don't... Jakari nodded, her white fur as fluffy as a nebula. The residents reported having hallucinations, seeing ghosts, or... Oh, said the captain, nearly shouting. Now, I know what you're talking about. I already sent a crew to take care of that. One of her ears perked a little higher. Well, I just saw just now that the task got knocked off, but when I spoke to engineering, they had no record. Well, I handled that one personally, he said. angrily pulling his strand from his right shoulder. That's why I marked the ancestors' damned item off. Now, I've got to call engineering and get that crew reassigned. Hun, she asked, putting her paw to his strand and lowering it toward the table. What's got you so upset all of a sudden? This is just a minor error, a little duplication of effort. Atari's ears frowned. I'm upset because this is precisely the sort of thing that Commander Souci jumped my case about during his last inspection. He's coming in the morning, and if he sees another... All right, said the commander gently, standing from the table. This was my mistake. I assigned the second crew. I'll go down there personally and find something else for them to do so no one will be idle. Despite his uncharacteristic overreaction to what seemed like a minor error, she kissed him between the ears. Thanks, hon, he said, picking his computer tablet back up as she left the conference room. Down on deck 20, she caught up with a crew in gas masks loitering just out of 20401. Commander? Said the red guru, peeling his mask off. You told us to track down a gas leak, but there's a crew in there already, and they're tearing out the walls. A bunch of real rude bastards, too. I'm so sorry, she said, touching his shoulder. Crossed wires. The captain already sent a crew. You wouldn't mind bearing this mistake, would you? It'd be a personal favor. Bury it, ma'am? He asked in surprise. Sure. Instead of fixing this, she said with a wink, fix that nasty nitrogen leak across the hall. That should take you the rest of your shift. Nitrogen leak? Gasped the engineer. He grabbed his strand and started searching frantically for news of such a dangerous leak. Jakari just grinned. She leaned in closer and whispered, Go home early. Mark it complete in the morning, okay? With a quick glance to his peers, Eris nodded his understanding, and the commander pointed at the door to 20401. I'll take care of these jokers on the other crew and make sure they understand the bad attitude will come back and bite them on the tail. Her crew said a quick round of thank yous and hurried off in case she might change her mind about getting the day off. Then she turned and opened the apartment door without knocking. Inside, she found a crew of 3 that had indeed unbolted all the wall plates from inside the apartment, exposing the struts and structural supports inside them. This was an absurd thing to do. Some utilities had to be located inside apartment walls, electrical conduits, plumbing, wastewater, and even trash chutes. But the ship's designers and the architects that occasionally rearranged deck latch were very careful not to pipe dangerous gases close to the living quarters. Even if they had to remove a single wall panel to isolate a leak, removing all of them was a sign of gross incompetence. Weirder still, the crew hadn't been outfitted like the one she sent. They did wear respirators, but they were the wrong sort. Not gas masks that protect the engineer from a noxious gas leak, but the sort that filtered out fine particulate matter like the vaporized metal generated from a laser cutter or engraver. And they were wearing laser eye protection, too. Why would a crew looking for a gas leak need such expensive eyewear? If anything, they should have been wearing safety goggles made from high-impact polycarbonate that would shield them from bits of flying metal when cutting or drilling into aluminum. What in the ancestors' names are you doing in here? Commander Jakari shouted. The workmen froze, pausing what they were doing for a moment and sharing a worried look. Jakari glanced down. The guru working nearest to her, a tan guru with a cream belly, had been... Was he running a handheld digital engraver across the inside surface of a wall panel? Why would he do that? And from how the panel was discolored and oxidized with age, the captain's mate could tell that whatever he was engraving on would align with the struts inside the wall when the panel was eventually reassembled. Why even engrave something into a metal plate if the pattern was just going to be covered by a heavy metal support once bolted back in place? You can't be here, the tan guru sputtered suddenly. He left to his paws and nearly fell on his face as he scrambled over the disassembled wall panel. With both palms, he quickly half-guided, half-shoved the white guru from the room. You can't kick me out, she shouted. But just the same, the workman ushered her out and closed the apartment door behind him, his tail pressed flat against the door as if his body could help keep the angry officer out. You can't be in there, he said, sounding slightly panicked. I'm Commander Jakari, and I have the authority to go anywhere aboard the ship. Yes, ma'am, and no, he said, now sounding a little more calm and authoritative. This is a hazardous area, and I know you don't have the safety certifications required because only 2 other guru aboard the ship do, and they're already inside. Safety certifications, she laughed, snatching the eyewear right off his face and waving them before his eyes. For repair work, you need to be wearing protective eyewear. These flimsy things wouldn't protect you from getting poked in the eye with a finger. That's just metal debris. Ma'am, the worker yelped. I... Jakari growled softly in frustration. Oh, I hate to pull rank on you, but I order you to step out of my way. And I hate to pull rank on you, the other replied, standing up a little straighter. But my orders come direct from the captain, not to let anyone inside. You're going to need to take it up with him. I will, she huffed, jabbing a finger into the workman's chest to emphasize each word. Then she stomped away, trying to cool her fury as she walked. This was a day like no other. First, her mate snapped at her, and now someone in the crew had defied her orders. Terry was always civil with her, getting only a little grumpy when he was truly tired. But the crew? The crew consistently treated Terry and Jakari as if they were the same. She and her mate were always on an identical wavelength, so they could speak for one another. If one said one thing, then surely the other would agree. Oh, Father, help me, she prayed, seeking a little strength and salvation from Captain Edal, gone away these 30 years since he hit his 60th birthday. Thinking about her mate once more, she shook her head. She wondered if his secular nature was what made him so frustrating. By and large, the Guru were very religious people. Though their religion didn't feature a god figure, most believed in reincarnation, that the souls of their ancestors helped guide them through difficult times. But not Atiru. Though respectful to others' beliefs, as he would need to be to lead such a devout crew, he himself didn't seem to believe. He kept only a single necklace in the little shrine they shared, and he never took the time to pray to it. She wished he would. Though she couldn't make him more religious, any attempt to push Atiru into something invariably made him dig his heels in harder, she wished that he could believe in the eternalness of the Geru's soul. Realizing that she was still carrying the workman's eyewear, she turned back towards 20401, and just for a moment she caught an unusual light through the thin plastic lens. A person, a Guru, standing there in the corridor where none had been just a moment ago, surprise evident on his upraised ears. But only for a moment, and the person she thought she saw was gone, stepping through a solid wall as if it weren't there, a shade, vanishing into the apartment beyond. Jakari stared at the wall where she had seen the specter, but it was only bare aluminum. On an inexplicable hunch, she pulled the bright red lenses over her eyes and stared at the wall, but it looked no different than it had a moment ago, just redder. But she'd been sure she'd seen someone standing there. So she thought on the sight a moment longer. She'd always had an excellent memory for details, for faces. She hadn't seen what color his eyes were, though they were wide and sad, almost haunted. His pelt had been dark, all except for his ears. Both of those were light. The commander gasped. She'd hallucinated someone, just as the residents of 20401 had. That could only mean that in her brief moment inside, she'd been exposed to the same noxious gas that poisoned the tenants. Without delay, she rushed off to the second med bay. She rushed off to the nearest med bay, the one on 20, not her usual doctor up on 5. In minutes, she sat back on an exam table, breathing pure oxygen from a plastic mask. Just breathe in and out, nice and calm, the doctor said in soothing tones. Nothing to worry about. If you did get a whiff of something bad, this should help flush it from your system. Meanwhile, I'll take a small blood draw and see if anything shows up there. Do you know what might have been leaking? Jakari shook her head. She sucked in oxygen. Lots of different things got piped around the ship. The most dangerous stuff was kept in canisters and shipped by runabout to minimize the risk of leaks. But even then, most gases were dangerous if you breathed too much of them. Where was this? She took the mask away from her muzzle long enough to say 20401. 20401, huh? Said the doctor, typing the address into the computer's tablet. I don't see any reports from engineering, so that's no help. 20401? Isn't that the next door to where D'Aston lived? Though it sounded familiar somehow, she didn't recognize the name and reacted only by raising her ears. D'Aston, he said again, trying to prompt her memory. Nice guy, dark fur, light on his ears. I did his autopsy last week. What a mess. Oh! Her eyes went wide. Murders were rare aboard the White Flower too, but they did happen from time to time. D'Aston had been beaten to death by one of his friends who was convinced the poor guy was sleeping with his mate. Jakari had no idea whether D'Aston had actually cheated with the murderer's mate, but the case had been noteworthy for its brutality. Not only had the murderer used only his fists to kill D'Aston, but the body had gone undiscovered for a few days until the neighbors reported a bad smell. Had she seen the victim's disembodied spirit? The notion wasn't completely absurd. Though D'Aston's birth token had been passed to a new happy couple once his body was discovered, the two might not have conceived just yet. After all, it had been only a few days. Where did souls reside before reincarnating into a new body? No one ever talked about that. This whole line of thinking was leaving Jakari on shaky theological ground, and the Guru religion didn't include priests or other spiritual authorities to ask. The doctor excused himself to go test Jakari's blood, leaving the commander sitting idle in bed, breathing through the mask. She realized that she still had the laser eyewear in her paws, and with nothing better to do, she dropped them over her eyes. As her eyes adapted to the red filter, she was surprised to find a thin band running horizontally around the medbay, about halfway up the wall. She removed the goggles, then put them back on. Whatever this band was, she could only see them under the red filter. She stood from the exam table and cocked her head, stepping closer to the wall. The longer she stared, the more clear the image became. It wasn't a line per se. It was a line of small symbols, not unlike the ones Atiri's crew had been etching on the inside of the wall plates in 20401. What were these symbols? They certainly weren't Guru glyphs. They looked a bit like Kraken runes, but older perhaps? More angular, less rounded. Yes, she was certain that they had to have a Kraken origin, but it was anyone's guess what they meant. The longer she stared, the more the runes seemed to dance and pulse. The less Jakari suspected that she had actually been poisoned. Whatever was going on here had a logical explanation, and she was going to find it. The commander pulled the mask from her face and shut off the oxygen flow. The pulses seemed to run across the length of runes, so she followed them, across the exam room and out into the corridor. The doctor was preoccupied and didn't notice her leaving. A few of the crew passing by waved, but only one paused enough to comment, "Fancy eyewear, Commander." She winked at him through the red lenses. "Scavenger hunt," she lied, "looking for my clues." "Ah, how fun!" He laughed as he padded away. The runes led Jakari down the corridor into the ship's central ramp. She followed them up and up, stewing the whole way. Whatever was going on here, Terry clearly knew about it. He had assigned that crew to etch runes in 20401, and they must have done these too. Whatever they were for was another matter, but the fact that he'd been keeping secrets from her, that was unacceptable. The runes led her up to the middle of the ship, deck 13. From there, she followed them down the main corridor to the ship's reactor. There, the runes ran along the deck, encircling the reactor itself. But the runes didn't end there. They spiraled up the walls of the reactor itself, crossing over themselves and wrapping the chamber in a mesh of glowing symbols. She stared at it, wordless, for the longest time before a voice to her left shook her from her thoughts. Her inquisitive mind trying to unravel the mysterious symbols like a cub trying to pull a fancy bow and ribbons from his visitor's day present. "Leave us," said Captain Atiri in a loud, clear tone. Jakari snatched the goggles from her face and realized that all the engineers stationed at the reactor were staring at her. After the briefest pause, they filed out in silence and closed the door behind them, leaving her alone with her mate. "What are you doing here?" she asked in a quiet tone. The big guru with the jet black pelt said nothing. He continued to lean back against the wall, his eyes staring at the reactor. "Praying," he said at last. In frustration, she snorted, "Since when do you believe in souls?" "Since always," he said. "Me more so than anyone else on board, I suspect." That made her laugh. And these markings, your secret little crewmate, these? Atiri shook his head. "Nah," said the captain. "These have always been here. The Kraken were very precise in their specifications of what must go where." He glanced at her. "Not in the design specifications that engineering gets to see, of course. But I've known about them since I became captain." "And you never told me," her voice strained and hurt, "about these wards," he completed for her, "to guide the souls." "What?" Now he looked at her. "It's a secret, of course, but our religion has it all wrong. Souls don't reincarnate. A soul is created afresh when each new cub is conceived." "Oh?" she said, not wanting to believe, but she could feel pieces falling into place within her mind. "And Destan's soul in 20401, those that die in medbay, I suppose those taken to the recycler as well. Where do they go? Do these wards guide them here?" Atiri nodded in silence, staring at the reactor once more. "For what purpose?" she pleaded, wishing he would at least look at her. "To contain them within the reactor's core? To keep the souls of the dead from haunting the ship?" "I wish," he sighed. "Then I could come down here and truly pray to Saran. Perhaps if I stood close enough to the containment vessel, she could even hear me." "Atiri," whispered Jakari. "There's a reason they don't allow us to live past 60, he whispered. "Why they call us before we've gotten really too old to work." She reached out to him, her pad stopping just before touching his belt. "They need us to die young, before our vitality has leached away," he explained. or else our souls wouldn't be vigorous enough to power the ship. As a what?
Ah, the Kraken.
I don't know. It's just that twist that just makes me laugh. I don't know why.
I liked it.
They're such jerks, you know?
I mean, it's all, it kind of fits in character, aside from, the spiritual element.
Ty, that is not canon.
Yeah, that's not canon. That's definitely not canon.
Or is
Oh,
it?
yeah? Well,
Yeah,
or is it?
Good times. All right, I suppose it's Miller.
It's Miller time.
Miller
Oh,
time,
jeez.
Miller time.
Oh, jeez. Oh, goodness. Oh, my. Oh, my. Okay.
For the approval of the Midnight Society, I would like to submit this story about a McDonald's. My friend RJ has always been interested in puzzles, so much that it sometimes drove a wedge between him and other people. He tends to get invested in more elaborate ones to the point of obsession. And if you're not as quick to put something together as he is, he can be a bit condescending. Overall, I think he's got a good heart, though, so I don't mind the occasional assholery. I was sitting in the school cafeteria Thursday afternoon when RJ plopped himself down next to me. He wore that shit-eating grin that said, Ted just posted a new logic puzzle. So, what have you got for me today? I asked him. Your parents are pretty chill, right? He asked back through a mouthful of pizza. I mean, yeah, I guess. Depends on what you mean. You think they let us go out Saturday morning around 3? I want to try something now. Ajay had piqued my interest and was hamming it up now. He was trying to suppress a smile, act all mysterious, but it wasn't working. You gotta tell me what it is first, I said, laughing a little to myself. I knew he wasn't gonna talk, though. He was relishing his little secret too much. He just shrugged his shoulders at me and turned his head back towards his pizza. I'll tell you more this weekend. Friday night came and I got a text from Ajay around 10. Don't fall asleep, dickhead. We'll be there at 3 sharp. I know why he was doing this. Ajay didn't have a car and relied on me to take him places pretty often. Where he wanted to go at 3 a.m. was beyond me, though. He's not exactly the kind of guy to get drunk in the woods. By 3 o'clock, I was on my second cup of coffee and I was fighting to stay awake. Ajay showed up at the front door, wide awake. Ready to go to McDonald's? He blurted out as soon as I opened the door. I mimed slamming the door in his face, which didn't change his attitude in the slightest. I think you finally owe me an explanation, I said, shaking my head. Why are we going to McDonald's? Ajay explained it to me as we got in the car. See, he spends a lot of time on 4chan. I don't. Apparently, he came across this thread about weird receipts at McDonald's. There are a couple of pictures included from people who had received these receipts. They all had a number written in red ink at the bottom of the paper. As an aside, I tried to find this thread he was talking about while I went to post this, but I didn't have any luck. I never used 4chan though, so if anyone can find the pictures and link them, I'd appreciate it. Ajay told me that some people noticed all the receipts were processed at 3:33 a.m. on a Saturday. This little detail is what got them thinking this wasn't coincidence, but might be some sort of big McDonald's secret challenge. Kinda like Cicada 3301 or something. I actually thought it was pretty cool. I know KFC did something like this with their Twitter account. They sent the guy who figured it out a picture of him getting the piggyback ride from Colonel Sanders. I thought maybe RJ and I would be the one with Ronald McDonald if we figured this out. All the receipts had one other thing in common. They all had ordered exactly 5 menu items. The red number at the bottom of the receipt was always a digit 05. These menu items differed from receipt to receipt, but they were all numbered orders. For example, number 1 was always the Big Mac. Ajay explained that this led them to guessing that the numbered menu items informed some sort of code that needed to be input in the right order. And I think I know what the passcode is, Ajay said in a dramatic whisper. Look at the receipt with the red 5 on the bottom, he continued. They ordered number 2, 1 number 1s, 2 number 4s, and a number 8. I think those are the digits of the passcode, 11448. They just need to be rearranged. And you figured out the right order? I asked excitedly. Pretty sure I did. I just hope no one else is beating me to it. What is it? You'll see soon enough, RJ replied. His sly grin had returned. I pulled into the McDonald's parking lot. It was almost completely empty. I could see a couple employees and a lone customer inside. There was no one in the drive-thru line. Just pull up to the start of the drive-thru and sit there. Don't place an order yet, RJ instructed me. You have to place this order at exactly 3:33. I didn't like the idea of holding up the drive-thru line, but like I said, there was no one around. So I figured it wouldn't be too much of a problem. We sat in silence for the next couple minutes. I kept my eye on my mirrors to see if anyone was trying to get in the line. RJ kept his eye on his phone, watching every passing minute. At 3:32, he told me to drive up to the speaker. We sat there silently for what seemed like an eternity as the poor employee tried to get us to talk to her. As soon as a minute passed, RJ leaned out my window and placed our order. I'll take a number 1. I'll take another number 1, please. A number 4, a number 8, and a number 4. We watched as each number popped up on a little screen next to the speaker. RJ seemed satisfied with the results. The employee told us to pull forward. So how'd you know that was the order? I asked RJ. He wouldn't tell me though. He just smiled and shrugged his shoulders again. We got our order and paid. The one working the window didn't give us a little wink or a knowing nod or nothing. In fact, she seemed incredibly bored. I handed the bag to RJ and he tore through it for the receipt. There, at the bottom, instead of a red number, was a red address. Holy shit, I muttered under my breath. RJ waved the receipt excitedly at the employee. Is this it? Are we supposed to go here? He asked her. The woman seemed incredibly confused. She looked at the receipt and squinted her eyes. She told us she had no idea what that address was or why it was on our receipt. RJ and I exchanged incredulous glances. Were the employees not in on this? Who was monitoring it and writing in the red ink? Maybe they were just instructed to play dumb. We pulled out of the driveway and I had RJ put the address into his phone. It was only about a 15-minute drive from where we were, and sure enough, it was another McDonald's. At this point, I was totally invested. RJ didn't even have to ask me. I was already driving towards the second location. Once we got on the road again, it was completely silent. There were no cars or people anywhere on the street. I suppose it wasn't too weird for such an odd hour. Still, there's someone sitting right with me. RJ seemed to feel it too. A sense of calm. There was no sound other than the purr of the engine. No rustling tree leaves. No overhead planes. No crickets. Nothing. I shrugged it off at the time as a side effect of being so tired, but now I ain't so sure. When we finally got to the second McDonald's, the parking lot was completely deserted. There were no cars, not even for the employees. All the lights inside the restaurant were on, but peering through the windows, it didn't seem like anyone was inside. That's weird, I said as we walked up to the front door. There's no one here. I reached forward and pulled on the glass door, expecting it to be locked. Instead, it gave way immediately, leaving off a cheery chime that seemed to linger in the air. Hello? I called out as we walked into the McDonald's. As I smoked, my breath appeared like a thick cloud of fog in front of me. It was freezing inside. Each of our footsteps echoed off the tiled linoleum floor. Is anyone here? Silence. This is too fucking weird, RJ whispered. I'm gonna check the kitchen. Maybe there's someone back there. I wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but he was already leaping over the counter. We should go, I said. I don't want to get in no trouble here. This feels weird. No, wait, hang on, he snapped back. What's that? She was behind the counter looking out towards the seating area. I turned around, following his gaze. There, alone on a table in the middle of the room, was a single Happy Meal box. We made our way over to the Happy Meal. On closer inspection, we could see a napkin sticking out from under the box. There were 2 words written in the same red ink from the receipt. Choose one. I looked back at RJ and he was just nodding at me furiously to open the box. So I opened the cardboard and reached inside. There were 2 small figures wrapped in plastic. Happy Meal toys. But as I looked at them more closely, a feeling of dread began to settle in the pit of my stomach. The figure in my right hand was short and stocky, while the one on my left was taller and more slender. One wore a green hoodie and jeans, the other was in basketball shorts and a t-shirt. It was us. The figures were so detailed, down to our eye color and shoe brands. They were dressed exactly as we were at that moment, tiny replicas of terrifying accuracy. RJ reached over and took his figure from my hand. Who could it How is... I just started asking through increasingly quick breaths, examining his own likeness in the toy. Dude, we need to get out of here, I managed to whisper back to him. I don't know what the fuck was going on, but I thoroughly creeped out by the whole thing. This didn't feel like a fun puzzle no more. I turned and bolted towards the door, still clutching my figure. RJ just stood at the table staring at his miniature. Come on, man! I yelled back at him, and I threw myself into the door. The door gave way, and I was met with a blast of heat. The silence seemed to crack as I crossed the threshold outside the store. A train blared in the distance. A dog barked across the street. I could hear cars driving along the highway in the distance. A slight breeze scattered some leaves across the tarmac of the parking lot. It was as if the whole world collectively breathed out a sigh at once. I turned back to RJ. The store was completely dark. There were no lights on inside. RJ was gone. I was frozen in shock. I was standing inches from the door I had just come out of, a door that now seemed to lead to an entirely different place. I finally came to my senses and pulled at the door again in a panic, trying to get back inside. Maybe RJ had just moved somewhere else, I thought. Surely he was right inside somewhere. But this time the door wouldn't budge. It was locked. I was completely beside myself at this point, calling out to him in a frenzy and banging on the glass door. After a few minutes of screaming, I had to stop and catch my breath. I sat down on the sidewalk in front of the door. Tried to stop myself from shaking and calm myself enough to analyze what exactly just happened and what I should do next. That's when I looked back down at the toy in my hand. It wasn't me anymore. It was a small replica of McDonald, but his eyes were pitch black. There was a little speaker on his chest and a button on his back. I threw it on the ground in sheer disbelief. As it hit the sidewalk, the toy let out a greeny whisper.
Good choice. Now start running.
You know, it had me until that last bit.
Yeah.
Nice.
I was gonna give it props until that very last part.
And then he turned around and his eyes were leaking ichor stuff. Ooh.
And then a skeleton popped out.
You know, the sort of Jersey-ish accent made me think of like Joe Pesci, like, yeah, there was a zombie and we beat his ass.
I didn't know what I was doing for the accents. I was just like, okay, I need to figure out two quick voices here. And so, yeah.
Anachronity says, I was expecting his friend to be trapped inside the toy or something. Would have been better. Yes. And not just another. Oh, it turns out this famous, recognizable character has black eyes.
Well, just goes to show you can't Ronald the McDonald or something Grimace.
Yes, you can.
You heard it here.
Kari has proven you can Grimace the Grimace.
It's true.
Alright, I cede the floor to you, Rick.
Okay. Let me get the link here. For the approval, the Midnight Society, the Gift of Mercy. Message begins. We made a mistake. That is a simple, undeniable truth of the matter, however painful it might be. The flaw was not in our observatories, for those machines were as perfect as we could make, and they showed us only the unfiltered light of truth. The flaw was not in the predictor, for it is a device of pure infallible logic, turning raw data into meaningful information without the taint of emotion or bias. No, the flaw was within us, the orchestrators of this disaster, the sentients who thought themselves beyond such failings. We are responsible. It began a short while ago, as these things are measured, less than 6 to the 6th daily ago, though I suspect our system of measure will mean very little by the time anyone receives this transmission. We detected faint radio signals from a blossoming intelligence 2 to the 14 Delis outward from the galactic core as photons travel. At first crude and unstructured, these leaking broadcasts quickly grew in complexity and strength, as did the messages they carried. Through our observatories, we watched a world of strife and violence populated by a barbaric race of short-lived, fast-breeding vermin. They were brutal and uncultured things which stabbed and shot and burned each other with no regard for life or purpose. Even their concepts of art spoke of conflict and pain. They divided themselves according to some bizarre cultural patterns and set their every industry to cause of death. They terrified us, but we were older and wiser and so very far away, and so we did not fret. Then we watched them split the atom and breach the heavens within the breadth of one of their single short generations, and we began to worry. When they began actively transmitting messages and greetings into space, we felt fear and horror. Their transmissions promised peace and camaraderie to any who were listening, but we had watched them for too long to buy into such transparent deceptions. They knew we were out here, and they were coming for us. The orchestrators consulted the predictor, and the output was dire. They would multiply and grow, and fled out of their home system like some uncountable tide of devourer worms, consuming all that lay in their path. It might take 6 to 8 delis, but they would destroy us if left unchecked. With aching carapaces, we decided to act and sealed our fate. The gift of mercy was 8 to the 4 strides long, with a mouth 2/4 that in diameter, filled with many 4 to the 4 weights of machinery, fuel, and ballast. It would push itself up to 2/8 of light speed with its fuel on board, and then begin to consume interstellar primary element 2/2 to feed its unlimited acceleration. It would be traveling at nearly light speed when it hit. They would never see it coming. Its launch was a day of mourning, celebration, and reflection. The horror of the act we had committed weighed heavily upon us all. The necessity of our crime did little to comfort us. The gift had barely cleared the outer cometary halo when the mistake was realized, but it was too late. The gift could not be caught, could not be recalled, or diverted from its path. The architects and work crews, horrified at the awful power of the thing upon which they labored, had quietly self-terminated in droves, walking unshielded into radiation zones, neglecting proper null-pressure safety or a simple ceasing of their nutrient consumption until their metabolic functions stopped. The appalling cost in lives had forced the orchestrators to streamline the gift's design and construction. There had been no time for the design or implementation of anything beyond the simple, massive engines and the stabilizing systems. We could only watch in shame and horror as the light of genocide faded into infrared against the distant void. They grew, and they changed. In a handful of lifetimes, they abolished war, abandoned their violent tendencies, and turned themselves to grand purposes of life and art. We watched them remake first themselves, and then their world. Their frail, soft bodies gave way to gleaming metals and plastics. They unified their people through an omnipresent communications grid and produced art of such power and emotion, the likes of which the galaxy has never seen before, or again, because of us. They converted their home world into a paradise by their standards, and many 10 to the 6s of them poured out into the surrounding system with a rapidity and vigor that we could only envy. With bodies built to survive every environment from the daylit surface of their innermost world to the atmosphere of their largest gas giant and the cold void in between, they set out to sculpt their system into something beautiful. At first, we thought them simple miners, stripping the rocky planets and moons for vital resources, but then we began to see the purpose to their constructions, the artworks carved into every surface and traced across the system in glittering lights and dancing fusion trails. And still, our terrible gift approached. They had less than 2 to the 2 daily to see it, following so closely on the tail of its own light. In that time, oh so brief, even by their fleeting lives, more than 10 to the 10 sentients prepared for death. Lovers exchanged last words, separated by worlds and the tyranny of light speed. Their planet-side engineers worked frantically to build sufficient transmission infrastructure to upload the countless masses with the necessary neuromodifications, while those above dumped lifetimes of music and literature from their databanks to make room for passengers. Those lacking the required hardware or the time to acquire it consigned themselves to death, lashed out in fear and pain, or simply went about their lives as best they could under the circumstances. The gift arrived suddenly, the light of its impact visible in our skies, shining bright and cruel even to the unaugmented ocular receptor. We watched and we wept for our victims, dead so many dailies before the light of their doom had even reached us. Many 6-4s of those who had been directly or even tangentially involved in the creation of the gift sealed their spiracles with paste as a final penance for the small roles they had played in this atrocity. The light dimmed, the dust cleared, and our observatories refocused upon the place where their shining blue world had once hung in the void, and found only dust and the pale gleam of an orphaned moon, wrapped in a thin, burning wisp of atmosphere that had once belonged to its parent. Radiation and relativistic shrapnel had wiped out much of the inner system, and the continent-sized chunks of molten rock carried screaming ghosts outward at interstellar escape velocities, damned to wander the great void for an eternity. The damage was apocalyptic, but not complete. From the shadows of the outer worlds, tiny points of light emerged, thousands of fusion trails of single ships and world ships and everything in between. Many 10⁶s of survivors in flesh and steel and memory banks ready to rebuild. For a few moments we felt relief, even joy, and we were filled with the hope that their culture and art would survive the terrible blow we had dealt them. Then came the message, tightly focused at our star, transmitted simultaneously by hundreds of their ships. We know you are out there, and we are coming for you. Message ends.
Aliens fucked around and now they're gonna find out.
I feel like that one needs to be longer. Like, that needs to be like a novel.
Yeah, that's a cool premise right there.
Don't mess with Earth.
Yeah, we're the real monsters.
Welcome to Earth.
Something, Independence Day. Cool. Whose turn is it now?
It is back to you.
Oh, cool.
If you have something
have-
like about 10 minutes-ish?
Maybe even less, actually.
Okay.
If Stoker ends early, I have a real short one.
Okay.
You're a real shooter. All right. Mythics, I think, briefly mentioned a collection of stories called Short and Shivery a few nights back. And I actually have that collection, because of course I do. This is an adaptation of an old Norse folk tale adapted by the author Robert de Souci. And since I forgot to say it for my previous story, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, this is The Midnight Mass of the Dead. There was once a very devout widow who lived in a small village in Norway and went to church every day. For many years, Juliana would go with her friend Berta to these services. When Berta died, she went alone. One Christmas Eve, she thought she would go to the early service on Christmas morning. Since there were fewer people at this Mass, she could sit nearer the altar, feeling close to the Christ child on this holiest of days. Before she went to bed Christmas Eve, she put out coffee so she could have something warm to drink because she did not want to go to church on an empty stomach. Juliana's alarm failed to wake her, but she roused herself out of a deep sleep sometime Christmas morning. Moonlight was streaming through onto the bedroom floor when she got up. She looked at her little alarm clock, but it had stopped with the hands frozen at 11:30. She did not know for sure what time it was, so she went over to the window and looked down the street to the church. Light was shining through all the windows, and opening her window sash for a moment, she was sure she could hear singing carried to her ears on the chill breeze. She hastily set the coffee boiling while she dressed. She downed a cup of the strong black brew, then got out her long pink cloth coat, lined and trimmed with rabbit fur, which she only wore on special occasions. Tying a white scarf around her head and gathering up her prayer book, she set out for the church. Oddly enough, it was very quiet on the street, and she did not see a soul on the way. Usually Christmas morning brought many to even the earliest services, souls who might otherwise never go to worship once during the year. When she entered the church, she found a pew very near the altar. But when she glanced around, it seemed to her that all the other people looked pale and strange, though she was not rude enough to stare at them. The woman on her right had deep circles around her eyes, as though she had just gotten over some terrible illness. The man on her left clutched the back of the pew in front of him with fingers so long and thin they hardly seemed to have any flesh on them at all. It seemed to Juliana that there wasn't anyone kneeling around her that she knew, yet she had the feeling she had met many of them before, though she could not say where or when. She settled back into the hard wooden pew along with the rest of the congregation when the pastor left the altar and climbed half a dozen short steps up to the pulpit. He was not Pastor Solvold, nor any of the other city ministers she was familiar with. The visitor was a tall, pale man who preached quite well. Again, she had the nagging feeling that she knew him from some time long ago, but she could not place him. He spoke of death and those who lay waiting the resurrection under the Christmas snows and who grew impatient with eternity. Juliana found his themes morbid and not at all the message of joy and hope she expected. The preacher rambled on, and she became restless, shifting uncomfortably in her pew. As she let her mind wander, she realized there was not the noise and coughing and throat clearing that she was used to hearing at any early mass. The silence was so absolute that when she nervously dropped her prayer book, the sound seemed to boom out from the altar to the choir loft. The preacher paused and stared at her with red-rimmed eyes that had no trace of kindness in them at all. Juliana picked up her prayer book, but she was feeling so uneasy that her hand was trembling. When the preacher had finished his sermon, he led the congregation in a hymn. The music was strange, and the words were unfamiliar to Juliana. Leaves have their time to fall, and flowers wither at the north wind's breath, and stars to set, but all thou hast all seasons for thine own, O death. She was so uncomfortable that she could not get any words out. She was aware of the woman on her right and the man on her left staring at her with the same intensity as had the strange pastor. Suddenly, while the singing continued, a woman who was sitting behind Juliana leaned forward and whispered in her ear, "Throw your coat over your shoulders and go, quickly. If you're still here when the mass is over, you're finished. This is a service held by the dead." Now the widow was frightened. She wasn't sure her legs would support her, but she recognized the voice of the woman who had warned her and turned around. It was Berta, her friend, who had died many years ago. In a flash, she realized that the pastor and other members of the congregation that she had recognized were persons who had died in the parish over the years. She shivered from terror, but Berta gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze, so she pulled her coat loosely around her and got up to leave. But just as she reached the aisle, the woman with the sunken eyes and the man with the bony fingers began to screech. These ghastly figures turned in the pew and snatched at her. Like a sea that has suddenly been churned by winds, the crowd of horrible, pale churchgoers rose in their pews and began clamoring toward the aisle. They yelled and moaned and scratched at her, their hands like claws, with dirt and mold beneath their cracked yellow fingernails. Sobbing, "No, no, no!" Juliana pushed her way down the aisle. Just as she shoved her way through the doors and out onto the church steps, she felt her coat pulled from her shoulders by the creatures chasing her. Without giving it a second thought, she let them have the coat and ran down the steps into the windy street beyond. The moment she reached her own door, she heard a clock somewhere chiming 1. She fumbled out her key, unlatched the door, and slammed it behind her. Half dead with terror, she set about lighting every lamp and candle in her room. Then she sat on the couch, determined to keep watch through the small hours of the night. But, exhausted as she was, she fell asleep. Juliana awoke late in the morning. Most of the candles had burned themselves out. Only a single lamp was still burning on the mantel. Through the gray light, she heard the church summoning the faithful to Christmas morning services. Had she dreamed it all? She wondered. But when she went to put on her favorite coat, she could not find it in the closet. Putting on an old black coat, she went out into the street and was greeted by her neighbors, who were hurrying to Mass. Yes, she told herself. It had all been a nightmare, and she had simply misplaced her coat. She would find it soon enough. She had to force herself to mount the steps and enter the back of the church. For all that, it was crowded with friends and neighbors. But she turned and fled when the sexton came up to her saying, "I think this is yours, isn't it? I've seen you wearing it at church before." He held out to Juliana her pink cloth coat with the rabbit lining and trim, which had been torn into 1,000 strips.
Nice.
I read that for the first time when I was in like 4th grade or something like that, and it left an impact on me because I liked I really liked the concept of the dead having their own church service, and the service basically amounting to, when is the resurrection going to happen? We're so tired of waiting.
Very good.
Do we have time for one more? It's about
I don't know,
3
dude.
minutes.
It is midnight, but if it's very short, we can do one more.
It's like 3 minutes. Okay, Stoker, I need your help with this one. I need you to voice the narrator, okay?
Oh, okay.
I just posted in the channel. The narrator is the text in bold.
All right,
I'll
hang
be
on.
the protagonist. You ready?
The only sensible ritual pasta?
Yeah. Submitted for the
Okay,
approval
here
of
we
the
go.
Midnight Society. This is the only sensible ritual pasta.
You wake up to find yourself lying flat in an unfamiliar and utterly filthy room. Your head pounds as you sit up and survey your surroundings.
Oh, what hit me?
You notice the room is dimly lit by a hanging bulb that threatens to flicker out at any moment. Large piles of debris are scattered about the small room, and there are no windows.
Who said that? Where am I?
To your left, right, and straight ahead of you, there are sinister-looking doors. You do not fully comprehend your situation, but you must choose one of these doors. One door
Hey, are you ignoring me?
leads to salvation. One leads to an endless maze of halls and passages that will trap you forever. And the third leads to eternal damnation. You must...
Wait. What? Are you serious?
You must choose a door.
Why? The exit's right there.
In the cold, frightened core of your heart, you know that there is no escape from the desolate predicament you now find yourself in.
Dude, the door is right there. It even says so. See? Exit, right on the front. Big letters, too.
After a moment's struggle, you come to realize the futility of resistance and return once more to the crossroads of passages. There is no way out.
Only because some bastard locked up the exit.
You grumble to yourself as you contemplate.
It was you, wasn't it? Jerk.
Contemplate your fate.
Fine. Eeny, meeny, miny. That one.
You say to yourself as you choose the door to your left. Unbeknownst to you is that particular door leads only to misery, death, and the destruction of your very soul.
What? Hell no.
A sudden burst of intuitive clarity causes you to leap away back before the door closes behind you, sealing your fate.
It wasn't intuition. You just said.
You must make your choice between the remaining two doors. With a sigh, you go towards the one in the middle.
I know what I'm doing.
You mutter.
I don't need you telling me, prick.
You take hold of the doorknob to the passage that will lead you to wander the maze for all eternity, oblivious to the fate that will soon befall you. Deathless, mindless, and hopeless, your rotting corpse will still walk on long after.
Ah!
You cry as you once again leap back from your choice of passage.
Don't get snappy with me. So, one door left. Salvation. Oh.
You say as you head towards the final door, and grasp the handle. The path you have chosen will be long and fraught with peril. You will face unsurmountable, bloodthirsty foes and travel farther than the simple realms you think of as life and death. Should you fail, your tattered soul will serve as one of the torture's spectral servants of the Lord of the Underworld, Gwyn ap Nud. Should
Wait a minute.
you succeed, you will have all the unimaginable pleasures of this world and the next, though you will be doomed to remain in the Underworld as Gwyn's right-hand man.
Hold up, you omniscient lying pack of dog crap. You said one of the doors would get me out of here. Salvation, remember? How is being trapped in the underworld salvation? Get me out.
There is no escape.
Don't give me that. There's always a way out.
There is no... Wait, what are you doing? Where did you get that pipe?
It was lying in one of those piles of trash. What does it look like I'm doing? I'm trying to bust down the exit.
You can't do that. It's against the rules.
Oh, there are rules now, huh? So what happened to your big scary narrator voice?
There is no escape.
Yeah, there will be. Just give me a minute. Just a look. There! Haha! Got it.
You can't.
I just did. Goodbye and good luck, Mr. Scary Voice. I'm going home. Go find another stooge.
Fuck it. I'm out of here, too. This place gives me the willies.
God damn. Yeah, no, I don't think I can think of any two better people to do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, that needs to be Stoker.
Stanley
It has to
awakened
be.
in a room with 3 doors.
Yeah.
Very good, very good.
Well, that was fun. This has been a blast, as always.
Yes. Thank
Yeah,
you, gentlemen, all for joining us tonight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thank you. And thank you all out there in chat.
Thank everybody for stopping by to listen.
Every
Mhm.
single one of you, we give you kisses.
We hope to see some more guests next week. Unfortunately, we had a lot of scheduling and technical conflicts today, but hopefully next week we'll have more people to join in.
Yeah, so tune in next time. Same Roo time, same Roo channel.
I declare this meeting of the Midnight Society closed.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.